The sun had not yet stretched its arms across the sky when the first whispers of that cursed morning began. In the heart of the village, beneath the old cashew tree, a tree older than anyone living, a tree that had seen births, deaths, marriages, quarrels, and reconciliations, men gathered with a purpose darker than the night that was slipping away. But what no one in the village knew that day was that the hooded buyer hiding his face was not a stranger. He was the only man who could save her life. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, the truth will leave you breathless. The cashew tree was sacred. It was where elders once prayed for rain, where lovers once carved their names into the bark, where mothers once tied strips of cloth to ask for fertility. But on that day, its branches bent low as if ashamed, for it was about to bear witness to something no tree should ever see: a human life traded for an animal. From the southern path came a man dragging a fat pig, tied with a rope of twisted palm fiber. The pig squealed, resisting, its hooves scratching the red earth, as if it too knew it was being summoned into a shameful bargain. The man's eyes were cold, his face hidden beneath a rough hood. On his back hung a sack of corn, bouncing with each step. He did not greet anyone. He did not need to. Everyone knew why he had come. From the western path came another figure, Aquil's uncle. His shoulders were as hard as the granite hills, his lips pressed tight like a man carrying more than words. But in truth, he carried only cruelty. He brought with him Yandera, young widow, weary mother, dragged like a discarded bundle. In her arms, her newborn son, Mandama, slept peacefully, his small breaths unaware that he too was part of the trade. They had woken Yandere before dawn with lies. "We are visiting the neighboring village," they told her. She hadn't even combed her hair, hadn't prepared her baby's porridge. She was tossed onto a cart like a broken pot no longer worthy of use. When they reached the cashew tree, no explanation was given, only silence. The hooded man looked at her the way men look at cattle, measuring, weighing, deciding. Aquil's uncle cleared his throat like a merchant impatient to close a deal. "That is it," he muttered. "The pig clears the debt. The corn is for the trouble. Take them both." Yandera froze. The words struck her chest like a spear. Take them both. Her heart began to race. She looked around, searching for an ally, a neighbor, a friend, the village elder, anyone. But all she saw were eyes lowered to the ground, mouths sealed shut by cowardice. Only a boy by the fence, his face smeared with dust, found the courage to speak. "Is this a sale or a punishment?" The words cut through the air like a machete, but no one answered. No one dared. The hooded man, silent as stone, handed the pig's rope to Aquil's uncle. In return, he seized Yandera's wrist, firm and unyielding, and gestured for her to follow. She resisted. Her knees trembled. "Where are we going? Why, please?" But her uncle turned his back. To him she was no longer blood. She was debt. Mandama began to cry, sensing his mother's fear. She rocked him, whispering lullabies through her tears, trying to pour strength into her child's tiny heart. The hooded man said nothing. His silence was heavier than any insult, heavier than any curse. Step by step, he pulled her away from the village. Step by step, the dust rose around them, clinging to their skin, their hair, their dignity. Behind them, the cashew tree stood still, but something had changed. Its bark seemed darker, its branches stiffer. Because from that day, it no longer carried only fruit. It carried the memory of shame. Yandera's chest burned. What kind of man accepts such a bargain, she thought. What kind of man takes a woman and her baby as if they were sacks of cassava? But the village remained silent. The children went back to their play, though their laughter had turned uneasy. The women returned to their cassava pounding, though their pestles fell heavier. The men sharpened their machetes, though their eyes refused to look up. No one said, "This is wrong." No one held her arm. No one stopped the hooded man. And so, Yandera walked into the unknown, each step an unspoken farewell, each silence a wound carved into her soul. The road stretched out before them like an endless scar across the red earth, the sun still rising, threw golden light across the land, but for Yandera it felt like walking into darkness. Each step raised dust that clung to her bare feet, dust that whispered, "You are nothing. You have been traded," held her baby tighter. Mandima stirred against her chest, his small cry muffled by her heartbeat. "Shh," she whispered, though her own voice trembled. "If I cannot protect myself, let me at least protect him." The man who led her said nothing. His hood concealed his face, but his silence was more terrifying than a threat. He moved with steady strides, like one who knew exactly where he was going, yet offered no explanation, no comfort, no glance behind. Yandera's mind spun. Was he a slave trader, a cruel man who collected women like cattle? Was he punishment sent by the gods for some unknown sin? Fear gnawed at her, but alongside the fear, anger stirred. Am I not human? Am I not someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother? Yet here, I walk as if I am nothing but a debt repaid. Hours passed. The road grew narrower, the trees taller, their branches weaving together like guardians of a secret path. Birds sang in the distance, but their songs did not soothe her. They sounded like warnings. At midday, her legs burned, her throat ached with thirst, and her back screamed from the weight of her child. The hooded man finally stopped, without a word. He chose a small clearing by a stream. He dropped his bundle, gathered stones, and with practiced ease kindled a fire. Yandera stood apart, her body trembling. She thought of running, she thought of screaming, but where would she run? The forest was vast. She was a mother with a newborn, her strength already spent. The man tore a banana leaf, placed roasted cassava and dried meat upon it, and with his foot pushed it toward her. It was not an invitation. It was not kindness. It was duty. Yandera hesitated, her pride warring with her hunger. But Mandima needed milk, and for that she needed strength. So she ate, not for herself, but for him. When night fell, the stars spilled across the sky like scattered cowrie shells. The man sat against a tree, spear across his lap, eyes on the fire. He made no move toward her, no attempt to speak. Yandera rocked her child until his small breaths grew steady. Then, unable to contain herself, she whispered into the silence. "Who are you? Why did you take me? What kind of man accepts such a shameful trade?" The knight answered, only with the crackle of the fire. Just as her eyelids began to close from exhaustion, his voice broke the silence deep, low, almost like the earth itself speaking. "You remember me, but not now." The words struck her heart like a drumbeat. She froze, her breath caught. "What do you mean?" she wanted to ask. But something in his tone, calm, heavy, ancient, silenced her. It was not a threat. It was not a lie. It was something else, something older, something hidden. The phrase circled her thoughts like a hawk in the night sky. "You remember me, but not now." Yandera lay down, her mind tangled in riddles. Exhaustion pulled her into sleep, but her dreams were restless. She saw shadows of her late husband's face, the laughter of children she once knew, a boy making dolls of woven vine. The past stirred within her like an old drumbeat, half remembered, half forgotten. She woke before dawn, Mandima warm against her chest, her heart still echoing those words. The man was already awake, fire extinguished, spear in hand. Without a word, he motioned with his chin for her to rise. And so they walked again, more dust, more silence. But Yandera no longer walked with the same stiffness. Fear still weighed upon her, but alongside it was curiosity. Who was this man who treated her neither cruelly nor kindly, who bought her like a possession, but guarded her like a treasure? The forest gave no answers. The road stretched on. But in Yandera's chest, a question had taken root, a question that would not leave her until the truth revealed itself. They walked for hours. The forest thickened, swallowing the road behind them. Shafts of sunlight pierced through the canopy, illuminating patches of red soil and fallen leaves. Yandera's arms ached from holding Mandima, yet she refused to let him go. Her son's tiny breaths were her only anchor in this endless journey. The hooded man led with unyielding steps. He neither slowed nor spoke. His silence was a cloak, and Yandera felt herself walking inside it, both shielded and suffocated. By dusk, the trees thinned. Before them stretched a clearing alive with sound, women pounding cassava by the river, children chasing each other barefoot, men mending fishing nets. Smoke from cooking fires rose into the air, carrying the scent of roasted maize and groundnuts. A village. Yandera's heart quickened. Fear prickled her skin. Would they laugh at her, judge her, cast her out as her own people had done? But something strange happened. The moment the hooded man stepped into the clearing, the people lifted their eyes. They nodded, not with surprise, not with suspicion, but with quiet recognition. Some whispered his name, Nando. Others simply called him the Hunter. No one asked who the woman was. No one demanded to know why she carried a child. In this village, every soul carried their own untold story, and no one pressed for answers. Silence was respect. Yandera, expecting whispers and stares, instead found indifference that felt like mercy. She was not questioned, not mocked. She was simply allowed to exist. The man, Nando, guided her to the edge of the village, to a small hut of red clay and thatched grass. Its walls were sturdy, its porch shaded, its hammock swayed gently in the breeze. It was not grand, but it was clean. It was shelter. He did not enter. He set down a gourd of water, a bundle of firewood, and a small sack of salt at the doorway. Then he turned and walked away into the trees. Yandera stood at the threshold. Mandema in her arms, stunned. No demands, no orders, no chains, just silence and presence. That night, she sat at the doorway of the hut, rocking her child as the forest darkened. Two women passed by, whispering, "Is she the woman he brought?" "She is, but if she came with the hunter, there is a reason. No one asks, no one dares." Their words were not cruel. They were spoken with the weight of lives that had seen too much suffering to judge hastily. For the first time in many moons, Yandera's chest loosened. She was not mocked as a widow. She was not branded as a debt. She was not bartered for pity. She was simply here. That night, she lay on a mat beneath the thatched roof, Mandema sleeping beside her. The wind carried the scent of the earth and the lull of cicadas. For the first time since her husband's death, she closed her eyes and slept without tears. Days became weeks. Slowly, Yandera learned the rhythm of this new place. She swept the yard, washed clothes in the stream, strained coffee, and pounded maize. She listened to the songs of the women, the proverbs of the elders, the laughter of children who called to Mandema as if he were one of their own. And always, Nando came and went. Sometimes he left hunted meat at her doorstep. Sometimes he sharpened his knife silently on the porch. Sometimes he returned with nothing at all, only his steady presence. He never forced his way in. He never questioned her. He was simply there, like the wind, like the forest, like time. At first, Yandera found his silence unnerving. What does he want of me? Why does he keep me here? But slowly, she began to sense something else in his quiet. Not absence, not coldness, respect. For the first time in her life, a man surrounded her without enclosing her. It was a warm afternoon when everything began to change. The air smelled of ground maize. The leaves of the mango trees swayed lazily in the sun. From the forest, Nando emerged as always, spear in hand, but this time he carried something else. He stopped at the porch and extended his palm. In his hand lay a vine doll, small, carefully woven, arms and legs shaped with care, a face drawn with charcoal. Mandima's eyes lit up. The boy stretched out his tiny arms and seized the doll with laughter that bubbled like a spring. Yandera's heart froze. This was not just any toy. She knew the pattern of the weaving, the way the arms folded, the charcoal markings. Long ago, her husband Aquil had told her stories of his older brother, the one who vanished into the forest as a boy, the one their father declared dead. That brother had once woven dolls just like this. The doll was a memory carved into her husband's laughter, now standing before her in flesh and silence. She lifted her eyes to Nando. Her voice cracked. "Who are you, really?" Nando said nothing. He only lowered his gaze, nodding slowly, as if confirming a truth that needed no words. Then he turned and walked back into the trees, but the doll remained, and Yandera knew. The man who had taken her as part of a cruel bargain was not a stranger. He was blood. He was history. He was the ghost of a brother long thought dead. That night, as Mandima slept with the doll pressed to his chest, Yandera lay awake with eyes wide, her heart pounding. The mystery was no longer just a hooded man. It was a past returning in the shape of woven vine. Because sometimes, memory hides not in faces, but in hands. The days moved slowly, like an old drumbeat echoing through the forest. Yandera lived between two worlds, one of silence and work, where she washed clothes by the stream and cooked porridge for Mandima, and another of restless questions that grew louder in her heart with each passing night. Every time she saw the vine doll in her son's hands, she felt the ground shift beneath her. It was not just a toy, it was a message, a whisper from the past. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Nando returned. He carried no food, no firewood, no salt. He carried only his presence. His hood still covered his face, but his eyes, dark, sorrowful, unyielding, held her where she stood. Mandima stirred from her lap, blinking sleepily, then reached his tiny arms toward Nando with a calmness that stunned Yandera. The child who feared strangers stretched out as if recognizing blood, and then, slowly, deliberately, Nando lifted his hands to his hood. He pulled it back. The world stilled. Yandera's breath caught in her throat. Before her stood a man lean from years in the wilderness, face carved by sun and silence, eyes shadowed by old pain. His jawline, the scar on his brow, the cut of his features, familiar, too familiar. Her knees weakened. She gripped the doorway to keep from falling. It was like looking at her husband, Aquil, risen from the dead, but older, worn, hardened. Not the same man, but the same blood. Nando's voice came, low and steady, like earth cracking open to release a buried truth. "I am your husband's brother. They called me dead, but I only left." The words struck her chest like lightning. Yandera staggered backward, her heart pounding against her ribs. Memories surged. Aquil's stories whispered at night. Tales of a brother who vanished after a fight with their father, a rebel who would not bow to injustice, a son who disappeared into the forest, never mourned, never spoken of again. Her voice broke, caught between rage and relief. Why come back now? Why return after all these years? Nando's eyes glistened, though no tears fell. His breath trembled, but his words carried the weight of iron. "Because I heard they sold you for a pig." The silence that followed was sacred, the kind of silence that trembles with more weight than words. The kind of silence ancestors lean close to hear. Yandera's strength left her. She sank to her knees, not in weakness, but because the ground was the only place strong enough to hold the flood inside her. Tears spilled, not gentle but raw, tearing through years of grief. Mandima cried too, frightened by the storm in his mother's chest. She clutched him, rocking him with trembling arms, whispering prayers that fell apart on her tongue. Nando knelt beside her. He did not touch her. He did not try to soothe what could not be soothed. He simply knelt, as if to say, "I am here. I am not leaving." Two wounded souls knelt in the dirt side by side, not man and woman, not widow and hunter, but survivors. Survivors of a family that had bartered away their dignity. Survivors of a world that measured blood in animals and corn. The fireflies began to glow in the dusk. The forest hushed, as though the spirits themselves had gathered to listen. That night, under the stars, Yandera gave her grief to the earth, and beside her, Nando gave his silence, not promises, not explanations, just presence. And in that presence, Yandera felt something stir, a word she had not dared speak for a long time. Hope, the village, had begun to breathe Yandera's presence, as if she had always been part of its soil. She swept her yard with calm hands, fetched water from the stream, and pounded maize while the rhythm of the pestle steadied her heart. Mandima laughed. Now crawling across the clay floor, chasing sunlight with his tiny hands, and Nando, the hunter, lingered quietly in the background, his silence no longer heavy with mystery but steady with protection. But peace, as the elders say, never lingers too long. It was early morning when the peace cracked. The air was still, the moon not yet fully gone, when heavy footsteps thundered on the path leading to the village. 3 men appeared, their eyes sharp with greed, their shoulders carrying the arrogance of ownership. 2 were bloodkin to Aquil, men who had once eaten from the same pot as Yandera, men who had called her sister-in-law, but now their tongues carried only venom. They did not greet. They did not bow. They did not honor the land they stepped upon. They came with demands. "The pig is dead," one spat, voice hard as iron. "The debt has returned, and since the merchandise is still alive, we are here to take her back." The words tore through Yandera's chest like thorns merchandise. She was no longer wife, no longer mother, no longer blood. She was cattle to be traded, a debt to be reclaimed. Her arms tightened around Mandima, who whimpered, sensing the storm. Before she could answer, before fear could steal her voice, Nando stepped out from the trees. His spear rested on his shoulder, his gaze sharp as firelight. He did not speak. He did not need to. His silence was a wall. The men shifted, uneasy, but arrogance kept their tongues alive. "She belongs to us. The deal was broken. We take her back." For a heartbeat, Yandera trembled. Old fears clawed at her, but then she remembered the night she had slept with her door unlocked, the day she was given food without demand, the hour Nando revealed himself not as a stranger but as blood. Her chest rose, her voice steadied, and for the first time, Yandera spoke with the strength of a tree that refuses to bend. "I am not a debt. I was not sold. I was discarded, and here I have taken root. A seed does not return to the hand that threw it away." Her words cut deeper than a machete. The men faltered, their eyes flickering with something they had not seen in her before. Dignity. One sneered, spitting at the ground. "You are not worth all that, Yandera." She lifted her chin. Her voice did not break. "To you, I never was, but to myself, I am worth what I am." Silence. Heavy, sacred. The village had gathered quietly at the edges of the clearing, eyes watching, breaths held. The children were hushed, the women frozen mid-step, the men gripping tools as if ready. The confrontation had outgrown words. This was no longer just a quarrel of family. It was the dignity of a woman. Or the elders. Summoned them the next morning. The old IPA tree spread its wide branches over the gathering, a place where justice had been weighed long before the world knew paper or pen. At the center sat Zumu, the oldest of the elders, a man whose back carried the memory of generations. His eyes were slow, his voice steady, his words binding. The three men stood to one side, Yandera and Nando to the other. The whole village circled in silence. Zumu's voice rose, deep as a drumbeat. When you traded this woman and her child for a pig, you claimed a debt. What was the debt? One of the men answered, scorn in his tone. She ate our food, drank our water, lived in our house. She was no longer anyone's wife. She was a burden. Zumu nodded slowly, his face unreadable. And the pig you received, was it healthy? It was, but it died, the men muttered. Maybe witchcraft, maybe sickness. The elder leaned forward, his gaze piercing. And if the pig had lived, would you have returned for her? The men exchanged glances. None dared answer. Then Zumu turned to Yandera. His eyes, though heavy with years, were kind. Daughter, do you accept to go back with them? Yandera lifted her face, her voice clear, steady, unhurried. I am not livestock to be bartered. I was thrown away like dry husk, but here I was taken in with no receipt, no bargain, no price. I was welcomed in silence, and I have rooted in this land. And a root does not return to the hand that casts the seed aside. The villagers held their breath. Zumu closed his eyes for a moment, as though listening to the spirits. When he opened them, his voice fell like rain on dry soil, is not weighed in meat. A woman is not exchanged like goats, and a child is blood of the future. Here, what came as barter has become seed, and a seed that takes root cannot be uprooted, the people murmured, a sound low and strong, like the stirring of the earth itself. The three men protested, waving a cloth marked with dirt and blood, their so-called receipt. But the village had already decided. One by one, men and women stepped closer, not with weapons, not with shouts, but with presence. And sometimes, presence weighs heavier than any sword. The men faltered. They spat curses. They kicked the dust. But in their hearts they knew they had already lost. They left the village empty-handed, their footsteps heavy, their shame heavier. And in their place, Yandera stood tall, no longer the woman who had been traded for a pig, but a woman rooted in dignity. Peace returned to the village after the judgment of the elders, but as the wise often say, calm is only the pause between two storms. For many nights, Yandera slept with a lighter heart. Mandima grew strong, his laughter echoing through the clay yard. The women of the village no longer saw Yandera as a widow to be pitied, but as a sister who had survived fire without turning to ash. Even the children called her Mama of Roots, for she stood tall like a tree that could not be bent. But one night, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon, Mandima's cry pierced the stillness. It was not the cry of hunger, not the cry of sleep. It was the cry of pain. Yandera rushed to him, his skin burned like sun-scorched stone, his breath shallow, his eyes red with fever. His small hands trembled, clutching at the air as though reaching for something unseen. Mandima, my son, my only son, Yandera whispered, her heart tearing. She did what her grandmother had taught her, bathed him in water, infused with eucalyptus leaves, laid cool cloths upon his forehead, whispered prayers into the smoke of burning herbs. But the fever raged on. By dawn, Yandera's eyes were red from weeping. Her body shook with helplessness. She clutched her son to her chest and begged the spirits, the ancestors, even the memory of her dead husband. Take me instead, but not him, not my child. He entered the hut silently, but when he touched Mandima's forehead, his expression hardened. His jaw clenched, his gaze turned dark. This is no ordinary fever, he said, voice low, steady. This is forest poison. Something brought here does not belong. No leaf in this village can cure him. Yandera's eyes widened with terror. Then what do we do? Will he die? For the first time, Nando's silence trembled. His voice carried both fear and resolve. There is only one place where the cure can be found, the sacred forest, beyond the wide river. Few who enter return, but it is the only path. Her hands clutched his arm, desperate, trembling. Number you cannot. They say spirits guard that place. They devour the souls of those who enter. Nando looked at her, eyes heavy but unflinching. He is my blood too. If the spirits want a fight, they will face me. If the forest wants a life, it will take mine, not his. Before Yandera could speak again, Nando had already taken his spear, a gourd of water, and a small bundle of dried leaves for the journey. He did not say goodbye. He did not promise to return. He only looked once more at Mandima, then at Yandera, and turned into the forest's embrace. Itself seemed sick. The hours crawled like wounded animals. Yandera sat on the floor of her hut, rocking Mandima's burning body, whispering lullabies that broke into sobs. Women came with herbs, elders came with chants, but nothing eased the fire inside the child. The night was worse. Mandima no longer cried. His strength was fading. He only moaned, his little chest rising and falling like a dying ember. Yandera pressed her forehead to his, tears soaking his skin. "Stay, my son, stay. If the world wants pain, let it fall on me, but you must live." Her body shook with grief. Sleep would not come. Her ears strained for any sound, a branch breaking, footsteps returning, a voice calling. And then, as dawn began to stain the sky, the forest answered. Branches cracked, birds scattered. The smell of damp earth filled the air. Nando appeared. He was covered in mud, his arms bleeding from scratches, his clothes torn by thorns. His eyes were wild but alive. In his hands he carried a bundle of thick green leaves, dripping with a milky liquid, and a small gourd of cloudy, foul-smelling water. "This is it," he said, his voice hoarse. "The elders call it the leaves of the ancestors. It is the only cure the forest gave me." He worked quickly. He crushed the leaves into a paste, spread it on Mandima's temples, chest, and back. He dripped the bitter liquid into the boy's mouth, forcing him to swallow, though he coughed. He lit a fire with sacred branches from the same tree where the leaves had grown. Yandera watched with wide eyes, hope and fear battling in her chest. Hours passed. Mandima's body trembled, then grew soaked with sweat. His mat became damp, and then, slowly, his breathing steadied. By afternoon, the child opened his eyes. His gaze was weak but clear. His lips parted. "Water," he whispered. Yandera cried out, tears streaming, laughter and sobs mixing in her throat. She pressed him to her chest, kissing his damp hair. Nando collapsed beside the fire, exhausted, his body broken but his spirit unyielding. In that silence, there was no miracle proclaimed, no song raised. But faith filled the hut, not the kind that shouts in temples, but the kind that dares to walk into the forest of death and returns carrying life. For that night, for the second time since Aquil's death, Yandera slept without fear, because she now knew her son carried not only his father's blood, but also the blood of the man who had returned, the brother who would walk through spirits and thorns to save him. After Mandima's healing, the village changed. People spoke less of the shameful barter that once defined Yandera's life. They spoke instead of the child who had stared into death and returned laughing, and of the hunter who had braved the sacred forest and walked back with life in his hands. The elders say, when a leaf survives the storm, the tree must sing. And so, the time for singing came. One morning, Elder Zumu appeared at Yandera's doorway. His steps were slow, but his presence was heavy as the earth itself. In his hands, he carried a gourd of honey and a small drum. He did not knock, for elders do not knock. They arrive with purpose. "The time has come," he said simply. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with meaning. Yandera bowed her head. Nando stood behind her, silent as always. Neither asked what time he spoke of. They already knew. That afternoon, the village prepared as if the ancestors themselves were to arrive. Women pounded maize until their arms ached, weaving garlands of bright flowers for the children. Men gathered wood and built a fire at the center of the great clearing. The air smelled of roasted yams and palm oil. Drums were tuned, their skins tightened with fire. When the sun lowered, painting the sky the color of ripe mango, the people gathered. No one was absent, not the youngest child, not the oldest elder, for what was to happen concerned them all. At the heart of the clearing, the fire roared. Sparks leapt into the twilight, as though carrying whispers to the heavens. The drums began. Slow, steady, a rhythm that echoed the heartbeat of the earth itself. From one side of the circle, Nando emerged. He wore his hunter's garb, not for killing, but for ceremony. His spear was wrapped in cloth, no longer a weapon, but a staff of honor. Around his neck hung a necklace of dried seeds and baobab leaves, strung together with deliberate care. From the other side came Yandera, Mandama in her arms. She wore a cloth of deep blue, simple, yet radiant, her face glowing in the firelight. She was not adorned with gold or beads, yet she carried a beauty no ornament could rival, the dignity of survival. The drums quickened. The villagers swayed, humming songs that had no words, only breath. At the center, Nando stopped before Yandera. For a long moment, they stood facing each other, the flames casting their shadows high against the trees. Then Nando spoke. His voice carried not only to the people, but to the spirits hovering in the night air. I did not buy you. I only returned what life tried to steal. What was cast away has been reclaimed. The words fell into the clearing like rain upon dry soil. The villagers felt them in their bones. Elder Zumu stepped forward. With slow, deliberate hands, he placed the seed necklace around Yandera's neck. Mandima nestled in her arms, reached for it with his tiny hands and laughed, a laugh pure as spring water. The people erupted into song. Drums thundered, feet stamped, voices lifted. It was not a wedding as the outside world knew it. No rings, no papers, no veils. It was a union of truth, sealed before the fire, the earth, and the ancestors that night. The village danced until the stars themselves seemed to sway. They danced not for romance but for justice. They danced because what had once been bartered like livestock was now honored as seed. They danced because the story of shame had been broken and rewritten into a story of dignity. Children carried flowers, women sang verses of old proverbs. Men stamped their feet in time with the drums. And in the heart of it all stood Yandera, no longer the discarded widow, no longer the woman who had been exchanged for a pig. She was now a symbol, a tree that refused to fall, a root that had found its soil. On the clay wall of her new house, someone wrote in charcoal, I was not bought. I was reclaimed. And the whole village, each time they passed that wall, would stop, lower their heads. And remember, thank you, my friends, for walking with me through this story. If it touched your heart, let us know where you are watching from. Your comments and voices keep these stories alive, just like the elders' words by the fire. Don't forget to like this video, share it with those you love, and subscribe so we can continue bringing you tales filled with truth, pain, and hope. From my heart to yours, thank you for being part of this journey.